The champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Trevor Ashford, the billionaire who had stolen everything from his pregnant ex-wife, her algorithm, her career, her reputation, froze completely as the restaurant doors opened, because walking toward him was the woman he had destroyed, 6 months pregnant, glowing, and on the arm of the most feared CEO in America. But here's what Trevor did not know. In exactly 6 hours, every investor in his $400 million empire would receive proof that his entire fortune was built on a lie she was about to expose. What happens next will shock you. Betrayals from people she trusted, evidence destroyed by her own allies, a custody battle for her unborn child, 3 devastating disasters that nearly broke her completely. She lost everything. Her money, her lawyer, her hope. But she had one thing left that no one could steal: her mind. And tonight, she was going to use it to burn his empire to the ground. Lesson and value. This story will teach you something powerful. Rock bottom is not the end. It is a foundation. And the best revenge is not destroying your enemies. It is building a life so beautiful that their shadow cannot reach it. Stay until the end. This lesson might change everything. The chandeliers inside the Glass House restaurant hung like frozen starbursts, their light cascading across Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop dining room. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park 42 stories below, where autumn had painted the trees in shades of amber and gold. On any other night, the view would have stolen every breath in the room. Tonight, no one was looking at the view. Trevor Ashford III leaned back in his chair at the best table in the house, the one he had reserved 6 months in advance for this exact moment. His $400 million expansion fund would close tomorrow morning. By this time next week, he would be on the cover of Forbes. Everything he had built, borrowed, and stolen was about to pay off in ways that would make his late father weep with envy. He swirled a glass of 1996 Chateau Margaux and let his hand rest possessively on Sloane Mitchell's thigh beneath the white tablecloth. She wore a dress the color of champagne, her blonde hair swept into an elegant twist that showed off diamond earrings he had purchased last month. She was beautiful, ambitious, and completely aware of the exchange rate between her presence and his wealth. Trevor was performing tonight, laughing a little too loudly at his own jokes, making sure Charles Whitmore at the corner table could see how successful, how confident, how untouchable he had become. Charles was old money, old values, and the closest thing Trevor had ever had to a father who believed in him. His signature on tomorrow's documents would cement everything. Life, Trevor thought, had finally arranged itself according to his specifications. Then the private elevator doors opened. The sound was soft, barely audible above the ambient piano music and the gentle clink of crystal, but something in the air shifted, conversations faltered, heads turned, even the pianist missed a note. Trevor followed the collective gaze toward the entrance and felt his champagne glass slip from suddenly nerveless fingers. It shattered against the marble floor, but he barely heard it. There she was, Madeline Cross, his ex-wife, 6 months pregnant, her small frame elegantly draped in a simple black maternity dress that somehow looked more expensive than anything Sloane was wearing. Her dark hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders. Her hand rested lightly over the curve of her belly. She was glowing, not metaphorically, actually glowing, as if someone had lit a candle inside her and the flame was visible through her skin. But it was the man beside her that made Trevor's heart stutter and stop. Dominic Reeves. Forbes had just named him the most feared CEO in America. They called him the surgeon because he cut clean and never apologized. His net worth made Trevor's expansion fund look like pocket change. His reputation made grown executives cry in bathroom stalls after negotiations, and he was guiding Maddie forward with a protective hand on the small of her back, looking at her like she was the most valuable thing in any room she entered. The entire restaurant held its breath. Trevor shot to his feet, knocking over a water glass that splashed across the pristine tablecloth like spilled guilt. Sloane grabbed his sleeve, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his arm. "Trevor," she hissed, "sit down. Everyone is staring." But he could not sit. Not when his carefully constructed world was walking past him like he was furniture. Maddie's eyes found his across the room. For one eternal moment, they simply looked at each other. Trevor saw no fear in her gaze, no anger, no desperation, just a calm, steady knowing that made his stomach clench with something dangerously close to terror. She walked toward him, not hurrying, not hesitating, just walking with the kind of quiet confidence he had never seen in her during their marriage. She stopped beside his table. "Hello, Trevor," she said, her voice soft but carrying perfectly in the hushed restaurant. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "What are you doing here?" The words came out rougher than he intended. "With him?" Maddie smiled slightly. "Having dinner, same as you." Then she leaned close, so close that only he could hear what she said next. "The due diligence report hits your investors' desks at midnight. Sweet dreams." She straightened, nodded politely to the frozen Sloane, and continued toward her table on Dominic Reeves's arm. Trevor stood paralyzed, watching them settle into seats with a view even better than his own. Dominic pulled out Maddie's chair. She said something that made him almost smile. They looked like they belonged together. They looked like the future. Across the room, Charles Whitmore was watching everything with narrowed eyes. Trevor's phone buzzed in his pocket. Then again, then a third time in rapid succession. His empire had exactly 6 hours left to live. He just did not know it yet. Here is something I learned the hard way, and I want you to remember it. The moment someone tries to make you feel small, that is when you stand tallest, not with words, not with arguments, with presence. The simple act of walking into a room with your head held high can shatter every weapon they thought they had. Maddie Cross had spent 2 years learning that lesson. The woman who sat across from Dominic Reeves that night was not the same woman Trevor Ashford had married 4 years earlier. That woman had been quieter, softer, easier to bend. That woman had believed the best in everyone, especially the man who promised to love her forever. That woman had been systematically destroyed. But destruction, Maddie had discovered, was not always the end. Sometimes it was the beginning of something stronger. She ordered sparkling water with lemon while Dominic reviewed the wine list with the sommelier. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the flutter of movement that had become her constant companion over the past few months. "You are sure about this?" Dominic asked quietly after the sommelier departed. "We could have chosen somewhere more private." "No," Maddie's voice was steady. "He needs to see that I am not hiding, that I am not broken, that everything he tried to do to me failed." Dominic studied her for a moment. "Most people would want to avoid their abuser in public. I am not most people, not anymore." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "No, you are certainly not." From across the restaurant, Maddie could feel Trevor's eyes boring into her back. She did not turn around. She had spent enough of her life looking back at him, searching for approval that never came, waiting for love that had always been conditional. Those days were over. The first course arrived. Maddie took a bite of butternut squash soup and allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. In approximately 5 hours and 47 minutes, Trevor Ashford's investors would receive a comprehensive report detailing exactly how his expansion fund had been built on stolen intellectual property, her intellectual property. The algorithm that had made him a star in the financial world, the predictive model that investors were betting $400 million on, had been created in their spare bedroom by Maddie Cross during 18 months of sleepless nights and obsessive refinement. Trevor had watched her build it. He had nodded along when she explained the breakthrough moments. He had said he was proud of her. Then he had presented it to his board as his own creation and had her fired when she tried to object. The restraining order had come next. Then the whisper campaign that painted her as mentally unstable. Then the denial of paternity when she discovered she was pregnant. Trevor Ashford had tried to erase her from existence. He had failed. "Your hands are shaking," Dominic observed. Maddie looked down. He was right. She pressed her palms flat against the table. "I am not afraid of him," she said. "I am angry. There is a difference." "Good." Dominic's voice was calm. "Anger is useful. Fear is not." A commotion erupted from Trevor's table. Maddie heard his chair scrape back, heard Sloane's sharp whisper, heard the unmistakable sound of expensive shoes striding across marble. She did not turn around. "Maddie!" Trevor's voice was right behind her now, tight with barely controlled fury. She took another sip of her sparkling water before responding. "Hello again, Trevor. Is there something you needed?" "What did you do?" His voice cracked. "What the hell did you do?" Finally, she turned to face him. He looked smaller somehow, standing there in his custom suit with sweat beading at his temples. The golden boy of Wall Street, unraveling in public. "I did not do anything," she said calmly. "The truth is doing all the work. I am just the messenger. This is not over." "You are right." Maddie stood slowly, one hand supporting her belly. "It is not over. It is just beginning." She nodded to Dominic, who had risen beside her. "I think we have lost our appetite. Shall we?" They walked out of the glass house together, leaving Trevor Ashford standing alone in the wreckage of his perfect evening. Behind them, whispers spread like wildfire through Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. The Billionaire had frozen, and everyone had seen it. 3 years earlier, Madeline Cross had been a different person. She stood in front of a mirror in a cramped Brooklyn apartment, adjusting the white dress she had found at a consignment shop for $200. Her hands trembled as she smoothed the fabric over her hips. In 45 minutes, she would marry Trevor Ashford III, and her life would change forever. She had no idea how right she was. Maddie had met Trevor at a conference where she was presenting a paper on predictive analytics in financial markets. She was 28 years old, a junior analyst at Goldman Sachs, brilliant but invisible in a world that valued confidence over competence. Trevor had approached her afterward, all charm and attention, asking questions about her research that made her feel seen for the first time in years. He had taken her to dinner that night, then to lunch the next day, then to a weekend in the Hamptons, where he had told her she was the most interesting woman he had ever met. Within 6 months, he had proposed. Within a year, she had left Goldman to work at his firm. Within 18 months, she had stopped recognizing herself in mirrors. The changes had been gradual, so subtle she did not notice until she was drowning. Trevor suggested she speak less in meetings because her ideas were better when he presented them. Trevor thought she should dress more conservatively because clients might not take her seriously. Trevor felt it would be better if she handled the household tasks because he was so busy building their future. Piece by piece, he had disassembled her, and piece by piece, she had let him. The algorithm had been her secret rebellion. Late nights in their spare bedroom, headphones blocking out the world, her mind finally free to do what it did best. Numbers had always made sense to Maddie in a way people never did. Patterns emerged from chaos, order from noise. She had created something revolutionary without even meaning to. The model could predict market movements with 93% accuracy. It could identify emerging trends before they emerged. It could make whoever owned it very, very wealthy. She had made the mistake of showing Trevor. "That is incredible," he had said, his eyes lighting up in a way that made her heart soar. "You are incredible. We should talk about how to protect this. I know some lawyers." The next morning, she had woken to find her laptop gone. When she asked Trevor about it, he had frowned in confusion. "What laptop? You have been so stressed lately, Maddie. Are you sure you are remembering things correctly?" The gaslighting had begun. Within a week, Trevor had presented her algorithm to his board of directors as his own creation. Within a month, he had secured $50 million in initial funding. Within 6 months, Ashford Capital was the hottest new fund on Wall Street, and Maddie had been quietly terminated for what HR called emotional instability and erratic behavior. She had tried to fight. She had gone to lawyers who took her meetings and then never called back. She had gone to journalists who seemed interested and then went silent. She had gone to former colleagues who looked at her with pity and said they could not get involved. Trevor had money. Trevor had connections. Trevor had carefully laid groundwork that made her look exactly like what he claimed she was. A bitter ex-employee with mental health problems making false accusations. The divorce papers had arrived the same week she discovered she was pregnant. "I want a paternity test," Trevor had said through his lawyer, assuming the child is even real and not another one of her delusions. Elena Cross found her sister crying on the bathroom floor of their shared Queens apartment, a positive pregnancy test clutched in her shaking hands. Maddie. Elena dropped to her knees beside her. What happened? What did he do? Maddie could not speak. She simply handed over the test and watched her sister's face cycle through shock, then anger, then a fierce protective fury that made her look 10 years older than 24. "That son of a bitch," Elena said. "Does he know?" His lawyer called it another one of my delusions. Elena pulled her sister into a tight embrace. Okay, we are going to figure this out. You are not alone." "I have nothing," Maddie whispered. "No job. No money, no proof. No one believes me. I believe you." Elena's voice was fierce. "And that is a start." The months that followed were the hardest of Maddie's life. She worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat. Data entry during the day at a small firm that asked no questions about her employment history. Bartending at night at a dive in Astoria where the tips were decent and the customers did not care if she was pregnant. Freelance coding on weekends. Building websites for small businesses who paid in cash. Her body ached constantly. Her feet swelled. She fell asleep on the subway more than once and woke up at the end of the line, disoriented and exhausted. But she never stopped documenting. Every email Trevor had ever sent her, every text message, every draft of the algorithm she had saved to a secure server he did not know about. Every timestamp that proved she had created the work months before he claimed to have developed it. She built her case in the dark hours between shifts when her sister was asleep and the city was quiet. She created encrypted files and redundant backups and paper trails that could not be erased. She did not know when or how she would use them. She only knew that someday Trevor Ashford would answer for what he had done. The call from Dominic Reeves came on a Tuesday afternoon in September. 4 months after the divorce was finalized, Maddie was shelving books at a Queens library, one of her side jobs, when her phone buzzed with an unknown Manhattan number. She almost did not answer. Ms. Cross? The voice was deep, controlled, unfamiliar. My name is Dominic Reeves. I believe we have a mutual interest in Trevor Ashford's destruction. Maddie gripped the phone tighter. Who is this really? I just told you. I am the CEO of Reeves Capital, and I have spent the past 18 months trying to understand how Trevor Ashford built an algorithm he is clearly too stupid to have created. Long pause. Why should I trust you? You should not trust anyone, Ms. Cross, but I am offering you something no one else is. A partnership, not charity, a chance to take back what is yours. Maddie leaned against the bookshelf, her heart pounding. What do you want in return? I want to watch him lose everything. Consider it a shared hobby. That was the beginning. Dominic Reeves was not a savior. He made that clear in their first meeting, 3 days after the phone call, in a corner office overlooking the Hudson River. The space was minimalist and cold, all glass and steel, nothing personal anywhere. No family photos, no artwork. Just efficiency and power. I do not do charity, Ms. Cross. Dominic sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Maddie's annual salary. I do investments. You are an investment. Maddie sat across from him, 5 months pregnant, wearing the nicest dress she still fit into. She refused to let him see how intimidated she was. You want my algorithm. I want Trevor Ashford's empire to collapse. Your algorithm is just the crowbar. You are the architect. What is in it for me? Dominic leaned forward slightly. Your name on your own work. A job where your brain is valued instead of stolen. And the chance to watch him lose everything while surrounded by witnesses. Maddie studied him carefully. The silver at his temples. The slight tightness around his eyes that spoke of old pain. The wedding ring tan line on his left hand, faded but visible. Why do you hate him so much? Dominic was silent for a long moment. My younger sister, he said finally. Her name was Rebecca. She married a man like Trevor, charming on the surface, rotten underneath. He took everything from her, her confidence, her career, her sense of self. When she finally left him, she could not live with what she had become. Maddie understood. I am sorry. I am not telling you this for sympathy. I am telling you so you understand. This is not business for me. This is personal. I have spent 10 years watching men like him win. I am tired of it. So you want to use me to get revenge for your sister. I want to help you get justice for yourself. If my motives benefit from that alignment, so be it. Maddie considered his offer. The money, the resources, the power that had been denied her for so long. I do not need you to save me, she said. Dominic almost smiled. Good. I was not offering. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Dominic's legal team would file a formal SEC complaint alleging fraud and intellectual property theft. The complaint would include a detailed forensic analysis of the algorithm's development timeline, proving through metadata that Maddie had created every line of code months before Trevor claimed to have developed it. Simultaneously, a due diligence report would be sent to every major investor in Trevor's expansion fund, raising questions about the legitimacy of his core technology. The timing was critical. The reports would land the night before Trevor's fund was scheduled to close. $400 million in commitments would evaporate overnight. It will not be enough to ruin him, Dominic warned. He will fight. He will lie. He will attack you. I know. You need to be prepared for what comes next. He will try to destroy your credibility, your reputation, your custody rights. Maddie's hand moved protectively to her belly. I am prepared. Are you? Dominic's gaze was sharp. Because the moment we launch this, there is no going back. Everything in your life becomes a weapon for him to use against you. Maddie thought about the past 2 years. The gaslighting, the isolation, the systematic dismantling of everything she had been. He has already used everything, she said quietly. I have nothing left to lose. You have that child. The words hung in the air between them. Yes, Maddie said, I do, and I will not let her grow up in a world where her mother was erased by a man who could not stand to be less than her. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Then we begin. Elena was waiting when Maddie got home that night. So? Elena demanded before Maddie even had her coat off. What happened? Is he going to help? Is he creepy? He sounds creepy from everything I have read. He is... Maddie searched for the right word. Complicated. Complicated how? Like, interesting complicated or serial killer complicated? Maddie laughed despite herself. Interesting complicated. He lost his sister to a man like Trevor. He wants revenge. Elena's eyes widened. Oh, so he has got, like, a whole Batman origin story thing going on. Something like that. And you trust him? Maddie considered the question seriously. I trust that our goals are aligned. For now, that is enough. Elena flopped onto their second-hand couch. So, you are teaming up with a hot billionaire to destroy your ex-husband. Girl, this is either genius or a Lifetime movie. Maddie smiled. Why cannot it be both? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Dominic's team gathered evidence, while Maddie provided context. She walked them through every line of code, every breakthrough moment, every night she had spent perfecting something Trevor could never have understood, let alone created. She submitted to interviews with forensic analysts who confirmed what she already knew. The algorithm was hers. The timestamps proved it. The development patterns showed a single creator's mind at work, not a team effort. The case was solid, but solid was not the same as safe. 3 days before the restaurant confrontation, Maddie sat in Dominic's office, reviewing the final documents. There is something you should know, Dominic said. I had my people look into Trevor's background more deeply, and he has a fixer, a man named Marcus Webb. His specialty is destroying people who threaten his clients. Maddie felt cold. What does that mean? It means that the moment Trevor realizes what is happening, he will not just fight the accusations. He will come for you personally. Your mental health, your fitness as a mother, every vulnerability he knows about. He knows a lot. Dominic nodded. That is why we need to control the narrative from the start. You cannot just be the accuser. You need to be visible, credible, sympathetic. The public needs to see you before Trevor has a chance to paint you as something you are not. Hence the restaurant. Hence the restaurant. Dominic's voice was calm. He will be celebrating his victory. We will remind him that the victory never happened. And if it does not work, it will work. Dominic's eyes met hers. The question is what comes after. Here is something I want you to think about, because I believe it matters. When someone has hurt you, truly hurt you, in ways that reshape your entire life, there is a moment where you have to decide what kind of person you want to become. You can let the pain harden you into something unrecognizable. You can let it soften you into something too afraid to fight. Or you can let it teach you. Maddie chose to learn. She learned that her value was not determined by Trevor's opinion of her. She learned that her intelligence was not a threat to people who were secure in themselves. She learned that being alone was better than being diminished. She learned that the only person who could truly destroy her was herself, and she chose not to. The night before the restaurant confrontation, Maddie stood in front of her mirror again. The woman looking back was not the bride who had trembled with naive hope 3 years earlier. She was tired. She was pregnant. She was scared. But she was also strong. Tomorrow, she said to her reflection, we begin. Elena appeared in the doorway. You okay? Maddie touched her belly, feeling the flutter of movement inside. I am terrified. That is normal. What if it does not work? Elena crossed the room and took her sister's hands. Then we figure out the next thing. But it is going to work. You know why? Why? Because you are the smartest person I have ever met. And you built something brilliant. And tomorrow, the whole world is going to find out. Maddie squeezed her sister's hands. Tomorrow. The morning after the restaurant confrontation, Maddie woke to chaos. Her phone was exploding with notifications. Texts from Elena. Missed calls from Dominic. News alerts stacking on top of each other like digital panic. She grabbed the phone and started scrolling. Ashford Capital, under SEC investigation, read the first headline. Investors flee troubled hedge fund, read the second. Whistleblower exposes algorithm theft at major financial firm, read the third. Elena burst through the bedroom door carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of pure triumph. Girl, Elena announced, you are trending, not in a Kardashian way. In a boss bitch way. Maddie sat up slowly, her heart pounding. It worked. Check your email. Dominic sent something. Maddie opened her laptop with shaking hands. The message from Dominic was brief. Charles Whitmore pulled out. So did 3 other major investors. Trevor's fund is hemorrhaging. Call me when you wake up. She called immediately. How are you feeling? Dominic asked without preamble. Overwhelmed. Maddie looked at the news headlines, still scrolling across her screen. Is it really happening? It is happening. Trevor has been in damage control meetings since 6 this morning. His lawyers are already filing motions to block the SEC investigation. It will not work, but it will buy him time. Time for what? That is what concerns me. Dominic's voice was careful. A man like Trevor does not go down quietly. He is planning something. Maddie felt a chill run through her, despite the warm coffee. What should I do? Stay visible. Stay calm. Do not hide. The moment you disappear from public view, he controls the narrative. Understood. Maddie? Dominic's voice softened slightly. You should feel proud of what you have accomplished. But do not celebrate yet. Wounded animals are the most dangerous. Never celebrate before the fight is finished. That is something I learned the hard way, and I want you to remember it. Victory is not the moment your enemy stumbles. Victory is the moment they cannot get back up. Trevor Ashford could still get back up. 3 days later, the counterattack began. Maddie was watching morning news coverage of the SEC investigation when the anchor's tone shifted. We are receiving new information about the whistleblower in the Ashford Capital case, the anchor said. Sources close to the investigation claim that Madeline Cross, the ex-wife of CEO Trevor Ashford, has a documented history of mental health struggles and was terminated from her previous position for erratic behavior. Maddie's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. The anchor continued. These same sources allege that Ms. Cross has made similar accusations against other employers in the past, raising questions about the credibility of her claims. That is a lie, Maddie whispered. That is a complete lie. The story got worse throughout the day. By noon, an anonymous source had leaked what they called evidence of Maddie's instability. Screenshots of text messages that had been manipulated to make her sound paranoid and threatening. Medical records that should have been private, twisted to imply psychiatric problems. By evening, a video had surfaced. Maddie watched in horror as a digital version of herself appeared to be having a screaming breakdown in an office. Throwing things, making threats. The quality was perfect. The behavior was completely fabricated. It is a deep fake, Elena said, pacing their small living room. It is obviously fake. Anyone can see that. Can they? Maddie stared at the screen. It looks real. It sounds real. Most people will not know the difference. Her phone rang. Dominic. I have seen the video, he said immediately. We are already working on proving it is artificial intelligence generated. But that will take time. Time I do not have. There is more. Dominic's voice was grim. Trevor's lawyers filed an emergency motion this morning. He is claiming you are mentally unfit to raise a child. He is demanding full custody upon birth. The room spun. He is going to take my baby. Not if we stop him. But Maddie, this is going to get worse before it gets better. You need to prepare yourself. How? How do I prepare for him taking my child? Dominic was silent for a moment. You fight. With everything you have, you do not stop. You do not give up. And you do not let him see you break. The calls started coming that afternoon. Her freelance clients, canceling contracts, her day job, putting her on administrative leave pending investigation, the bartending gig, letting her go because she was too much liability. Within 72 hours, Maddie had lost every source of income. She sat in her apartment surrounded by legal documents, her hand pressed against her belly, trying not to fall apart. Elena found her there, 3 hours later. Maddie, Elena's voice was gentle. You need to eat something. I am not hungry. The baby needs you to eat. Maddie looked up at her sister with hollow eyes. He is going to win. He has too much money, too much power, too many connections. I was stupid to think I could fight him. Elena knelt beside her. Hey, look at me. You are not stupid. You are brave. You did something most people would never have the courage to do. And now I am going to lose my daughter because of it. You do not know that. I know how the world works. Maddie's voice cracked. Rich men do not lose custody battles. Not to unemployed ex-wives that they have convinced everyone are crazy. Elena took her sister's hands. Then we change how the world works. We find another way. We do not give up. What if there is no other way? There is always another way. Elena's voice was fierce. You taught me that. Remember? When Mom died and Dad disappeared, and everyone said we would end up in foster care? You found a way. You always find a way. Maddie closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. I am so tired, Elena. I am so tired of fighting, I know. Elena pulled her into a hug. But you are not fighting alone. Not anymore. That night, Maddie could not sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, one hand resting on her belly. The baby was active tonight, kicking and squirming as if she knew something was wrong. I am sorry, Maddie whispered to her daughter. I am so sorry I cannot protect you. The thought of losing this child, of watching Trevor raise her with his lies and his cruelty, was more than she could bear. She had survived everything else, the gaslighting, the betrayal, the public humiliation. But this? For one dark moment, she considered running, just disappearing, taking whatever money she had left and vanishing somewhere. Trevor could never find her. Then her phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Do not run. That is what he wants. I have a plan. Maddie stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back. What kind of plan? The response came immediately. Meet me tomorrow, 9 a.m., my office. Maddie set the phone down and closed her eyes. One more day, she told her daughter. We just have to make it one more day. Maddie arrived at Dominic's office the next morning with dark circles under her eyes and a determination she did not quite feel. I need a lawyer, she said without preamble. Someone who specializes in custody cases. Someone Trevor cannot buy. Dominic slid a folder across his desk. Victoria Caldwell. She is the best family law attorney in New York. She has never lost a custody case involving documented abuse or manipulation. And she reached out to us yesterday. She reached out. She saw the news coverage. She wants to represent you pro bono. Maddie stared at the folder. Why? No one does anything for free. She is a women's rights advocate. High-profile cases, like yours, are her specialty. She believes in the cause. Maddie wanted to feel relief. She wanted to believe that finally someone was on her side, but something in her chest remained tight. Can we trust her? I had her investigated. Dominic's voice was measured. Her record is clean. Her motivations appear genuine. But ultimately, the decision is yours. Maddie opened the folder. Victoria Caldwell's resume was impressive. Harvard Law, federal clerkship, 15 years of experience defending women in exactly this kind of situation. Set up a meeting, Maddie said. Victoria Caldwell was everything her resume promised. Tall, elegant, with silver-streaked hair and a handshake that conveyed absolute confidence. She met Maddie in a conference room filled with awards and framed newspaper articles about cases she had won. Ms. Cross, Victoria's voice was warm. I have been following your story. What Trevor Ashford did to you is unconscionable. Maddie felt tears prick at her eyes. Thank you. I want you to know that I am going to fight for you with everything I have. This case matters, not just for you, but for every woman who has ever been silenced by a man with money and power. For the first time in weeks, Maddie allowed herself to hope. The days that followed were intense. Victoria moved quickly, filing countermotions that challenged Trevor's custody claims. She brought in expert witnesses to debunk the deepfake video. She arranged for Maddie to give a carefully controlled interview with a sympathetic journalist. The narrative was shifting. Public opinion, which had briefly turned against Maddie after the leaked stories, began to swing back in her favor. People were outraged by Trevor's tactics. They were inspired by Maddie's strength. Things were finally going their way. Then came the press conference. Maddie was at Elena's apartment, preparing for another interview, when her sister burst through the door. Turn on the news. Maddie reached for the remote. A sick feeling already building in her stomach. Victoria Caldwell stood behind a podium, perfectly composed, surrounded by reporters. After thorough investigation, Victoria said, I have concluded that Ms. Cross's allegations against Trevor Ashford are unfounded. The evidence does not support her claims. The video of her breakdown, while disturbing, has not been proven to be manipulated. Maddie could not breathe. Victoria continued. Given the troubling questions about Ms. Cross's mental stability, I cannot in good conscience represent her. I am withdrawing from the case, effective immediately. The reporters erupted with questions. Maddie's phone buzzed. Then again, then a dozen times in rapid succession. She did not answer. She could not move. Elena was staring at the screen. What the hell just happened? Maddie's voice came out as a whisper. She sold me. What? Victoria met with me to learn my case. Every detail, every strategy, every weakness. Maddie's hands were shaking, and then she sold it all to Trevor. The news broke within hours. Victoria Caldwell's law firm had received a $2 million consulting contract from Ashford Capital. The contract was dated 3 days before Victoria had reached out to offer her services. It had been a setup from the beginning. Dominic called that evening. His voice was tight with barely controlled fury. I should have seen this coming. I should have dug deeper. You could not have known. That is not good enough. He was supposed to protect you. I failed. Maddie sat in the darkness of her apartment, the phone pressed to her ear. You did not fail. He is just better at this than we thought. What do you want to do? I do not know. For the first time since this began, Maddie felt truly lost. I do not know. When someone offers help without being asked, find out what they want. Free has a price, always. I wish I had learned that lesson before Victoria Caldwell taught it to me. That night, Maddie's body finally broke down under the weight of stress. The contractions started around midnight, sharp, cramping pains that made her double over and gasp. Elena rushed her to the hospital, where doctors confirmed what Maddie already feared. "You are at risk for preterm labor," the doctor said. "You need complete bed rest. No stress." Maddie almost laughed. "Sure. I will schedule that between the custody hearing and being publicly destroyed." The hospital room was quiet and clinical. Monitors beeped steadily. An IV dripped fluids into her arm. She was 28 weeks pregnant. Too early for the baby to be born safely. Too late to stop fighting. A knock at the door. A man in a cheap suit entered, carrying papers. "Madeline Cross? Yes? You have been served." He dropped the documents on her bed and left. Maddie stared at the pages. Trevor was escalating. He was now claiming she was a flight risk, demanding supervised access to her medical records. Elena burst into the room seconds later. "What happened? Who was that?" "Process server." "Are you kidding me?" Elena's voice rose. "You are in a hospital bed. What is wrong with these people?" A nurse appeared in the doorway. Patricia Lawson, according to her name tag. Middle-aged, kind-eyed with the weary compassion of someone who had seen too much. "I have seen men like this before," Patricia said quietly to Elena. "They do not stop until they win or someone stops them." Elena looked at her sister. "So what do we do?" Maddie stared at the ceiling, one hand pressed against her belly, feeling her daughter's movements slow and settle. "I do not know," she whispered. "I really do not know." Dominic arrived at this hospital the next morning. He looked different somehow, less controlled, more human. He sat in the chair beside Maddie's bed and did not speak for a long moment. "I can make this go away," he said finally. Maddie turned her head to look at him. "How? Trevor's fund is dying, but not dead. I can acquire it, absorb the losses, give you full credit for the algorithm." "And?" Dominic met her eyes. "You sign over licensing rights to me. I control the algorithm. You get credit but not ownership." Maddie's breath caught. "That is my life's work, and it can save your child." Dominic's voice was steady. "Or you can keep fighting with no money, no lawyer, and a body that is failing you." The silence stretched between them. "I need to think about it," Maddie said. "You have 24 hours. After that, the offer is gone, and so is my support." He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked out without looking back. Elena appeared in the doorway. "What did he want?" Maddie stared at the ceiling. "He wants me to sign away my algorithm in exchange for his help. And if I do not, he is done with me." Elena's face hardened. "So he is just another guy using you for what you can give him. Maybe." Maddie's voice was tired. "Or maybe he is just being honest about it." That night, Detective Angela Martinez knocked on Maddie's hospital room door. Martinez was tall and no nonsense, with sharp eyes and a badge that she flashed briefly before sitting down uninvited. "Ms. Cross, I have been investigating Ashford Capital for 18 months. Wire fraud, investor manipulation, obstruction of justice. Your evidence could be the key to indicting him." Maddie studied the detective carefully. "Why should I trust you? You should not trust anyone." Martinez's voice was matter-of-fact. "But I am offering you something no one else is. The chance to put him in prison, not just ruin his career." "What do you need?" "The original algorithm, files with metadata, proving ownership, and you testifying before a grand jury. The files are on a secure server Trevor does not know about," Maddie said slowly. "I created backups of everything, then we have a case." Hope flickered in Maddie's chest. "Real justice, criminal charges, prison. Trevor could not parent from a cell." "When can you access the files?" Martinez asked. "I can do it from here." Maddie reached for her laptop. "Give me a few minutes." She logged into the secure server she had created years ago, the one with every piece of evidence she had painstakingly gathered. The login screen appeared. She entered her credentials. Error. Files not found. Maddie's blood went cold. She tried again. Same error. No, she whispered. No, no, no. What is wrong? Everything is gone. Maddie's voice cracked. Years of documentation. Metadata. Proof. All of it. Wiped. Martinez leaned forward. Who else knew about this server? No one. Maddie's mind raced. No one except... She stopped. Dominic's assistant had helped her set up that server 2 weeks ago, claiming it was more secure. Dominic knew about the files. Dominic had deleted her evidence. Maddie called him immediately, her hands shaking with rage. You erased my files. Dominic's voice was calm. Cold. I told you, I do not do charity. I do investments. Without those files, you need me. Sign the contract. You are just like him. Number 1, I am worse. I am honest about it. The line went dead. Maddie sat in her hospital bed, staring at her phone, feeling the last of her hope crumble to dust. He played me, she said to Martinez. From the beginning, Martinez's face was grim. I am sorry, Ms. Cross. Elena burst into the room. I just saw Dominic leaving. What happened? Maddie could not answer. She could not speak. She could only sit there, surrounded by machines that monitored her failing body, holding the evidence of her failing fight. No lawyer, no evidence, no money, no allies. Trevor was going to win, and there was nothing she could do about it. Sometimes I think about that night in the hospital, the darkest night, the moment when I truly believed it was over. And I want to tell you something important. Rock bottom is not the end. It is a foundation. You cannot build anything lasting on sand. But stone holds everything. I found my stone that night. Elena sat on the edge of Maddie's bed, holding her hand. We could run, Elena said. Leave the country. Start over somewhere he cannot find us. Maddie shook her head slowly. And spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, raise my daughter in hiding, that is not living. Then what do we do? Silence stretched between them. Then Maddie spoke. I remember every line of that algorithm. I wrote it. Maybe I cannot prove the old files were mine, but I can prove I can write it again. Elena frowned. What do you mean? If I recreate the algorithm in a controlled setting, documented by experts, it proves I understand it at a level Trevor never could. It is not the same as the original files, but it is something. Elena's eyes widened. You want to challenge him to prove he created his own work. I want to give him the chance to prove he is not a fraud. Maddie's voice strengthened. If he is innocent, he can explain his own creation. If he is guilty, he will expose himself. And you think that will work? I do not know, but it is all I have left. 2 weeks later, Maddie stood before a laptop in her Queens apartment. Detective Martinez, beside her, preparing to do something that would either save her or destroy her completely. The video statement had been Martinez's idea. Bypass the lawyers, bypass the media gatekeepers, speak directly to the public. Maddie had spent days preparing her words. Now she sat before the camera and took a deep breath. My name is Madeline Cross. 3 years ago, I created a predictive algorithm that my ex-husband, Trevor Ashford, presented to investors as his own work. When I tried to object, he had me fired. When I tried to prove the truth, he destroyed my evidence. When I tried to fight, he claimed I was mentally unstable and unfit to raise my own child. She paused, letting the words settle. I am not unstable. I am not delusional. I am a woman who built something brilliant and had it stolen by a man who was too insecure to share credit with his own wife. Trevor Ashford claims he created the Ashford predictive algorithm. I claim I did, so I am proposing something simple. A public demonstration where we both explain the algorithm's architecture with independent experts judging. Maddie looked directly into the camera. If Trevor is the genius he claims to be, this should be easy. He can explain his own creation. He can prove his own work, unless he is afraid. She ended the recording. Martinez uploaded it immediately. The video went viral within hours. The hashtag algorithm showdown began trending nationally. News networks picked up the story. Financial blogs debated the merits of the challenge. Social media exploded with opinions. Most importantly, the public was on Maddie's side. "She is brilliant," one comment read. "You can see it in her eyes. Trevor Ashford is going down," read another. "Finally, someone is holding these rich jerks accountable." Trevor's response came the next day. His lawyers issued a statement calling Maddie's challenge a publicity stunt designed to harass their client. But the damage was done. Refusing to defend his own work made him look guilty. The pressure mounted. Media coverage intensified. Investors demanded answers. 5 days after Maddie's video, Trevor Ashford accepted the challenge. The venue was a tech conference auditorium in Midtown Manhattan. 1,500 seats, all filled. Cameras from every major network. A live stream with over 500,000 viewers. The expert panel consisted of 3 people whose credentials were unimpeachable. Professor Richard Donovan from MIT, Dr. Sarah Blackwood from Stanford's Computer Science Department, James Crawford, former SEC analyst, specializing in financial technology. Maddie arrived with Elena at her side. She was 8 months pregnant now, moving carefully, one hand always on her belly. "How are you feeling?" Elena asked, terrified. "Good. That means you are taking it seriously." The green room backstage was cold and clinical. Maddie sat on a metal folding chair, reviewing her notes one final time. A knock at the door. Sloan Mitchell entered. Maddie stiffened. "What are you doing here?" Sloan looked different. The polished confidence was gone, replaced by something raw, more human. "I have something," Sloan said, "something that could end this faster." "Why would you help me?" Sloan was silent for a moment. "Because I have been him. Using people. Taking what I wanted, without thinking about the damage. And I just watched the guy I was planning to marry blame me for leaking to you when I never said a word. He is already planning to sacrifice me." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small recording device. "This is Trevor." Sloane's voice was steady, bragging about stealing your algorithm, laughing about how easy it was to gaslight you, planning to dispose of me once I was no longer useful. Maddie stared at the device. "Why should I trust you?" "You should not." Sloan set the recorder on the table. "I am not doing this for you. I am doing it for me. But you can use it." She turned and walked out without another word. Elena picked up the recorder. "Is this real?" "Only one way to find out. Allies come from unexpected places. People can change. Not everyone, but some. Do not be so hardened that you cannot recognize when someone is offering a genuine hand." The auditorium lights were blinding. Maddie walked to her position on stage, aware of every eye in the room fixed on her. Trevor stood across from her, perfectly composed in a custom suit, his expression conveying amused condescension. Between them sat the panel of experts. In the audience, Elena clutched the recording device Sloan had provided. The moderator, a neutral technology journalist, explained the rules. Each party would have 30 minutes to explain the algorithm's architecture. The experts would ask questions the audience would observe. Simple, straightforward, devastating. "Ms. Cross," the moderator said, "you may begin." Maddie stepped to the presentation screen. Her hands were steady now. Her voice was clear. "The Ashford predictive algorithm," she began, "is built on a foundation of modified Kalman filtering combined with machine learning principles that allow for real-time adjustment based on market volatility. She walked through the architecture step by step, not just reciting code, but explaining the reasoning behind every decision, the failures that had led to breakthroughs, the iterations that had not worked. The moment she had finally cracked the pattern that made the whole system function, the experts leaned forward, taking notes, their expressions shifting from professional interest to genuine admiration. Professor Donovan interrupted at one point. Can you explain why you chose this particular weighting system for the volatility index? Maddie smiled. Because standard weighting assumes consistent market behavior, which does not account for black swan events. My modification allows the system to recognize when established patterns are breaking down and adjust in real time. Donovan nodded, impressed. That is innovative thinking. Thank you. I spent 3 months on that specific problem. When her time ended, the room was silent. Then applause began, scattered at first, then building. Maddie returned to her position. The moderator turned to Trevor. Mr. Ashford, your turn? Trevor approached the screen with confidence. He had clearly been coached. His opening was smooth. The algorithm uses predictive modeling based on market variance and historical data sets, he said. It is designed to identify patterns that indicate future price movements. Dr. Blackwood interrupted. Can you be more specific? What type of predictive modeling? Trevor's smile flickered. A combination of approaches. The specifics are proprietary. You are claiming you designed this system. Blackwood's voice was flat. Explaining your own work is not proprietary. Trevor's composure cracked slightly. I had a development team. I did not personally write every line. But you understand the architecture? James Crawford asked. You could explain the logic if asked. Silence. Mr. Ashford, Donovan said, can you explain why the algorithm uses a modified Kalman filter instead of standard regression? Trevor blinked. Sweat formed on his forehead. That is, the filter is designed to... He trailed off. The audience stirred. Whispers began spreading through the room. Crawford leaned forward. Let me ask a simpler question. Can you describe the basic mathematical principle underlying the Kalman filter? More silence. Trevor's face drained of color. I am not here to take a technical exam. I am a CEO. I manage teams. But you claimed you created this algorithm, Donovan said. A creator would understand their own work. I did create it. Trevor's voice rose. I created the concept, the vision, then who wrote the code? Trevor's mouth opened, closed, and in that moment, everyone in the room knew he could not explain the algorithm because he had not created it. He had stolen it from the woman standing 10 feet away. Elena stood up in the audience. Now, she said quietly into her phone. The recording began to play through the auditorium's speaker system. Trevor's voice filled the room, crystal clear. Maddie's little project? I just took it. She was so pathetic. She did not even realize until it was too late. And by then, who was going to believe her? The unstable ex-wife versus me? Please. Gasps rippled through the audience. Trevor spun toward the sound booth. That is out of context. His voice on the recording continued. The best part? She actually thinks she can fight me. What is she going to do? She has no money, no friends, no one who believes her. I have already won. Detective Martinez stepped forward from the wings, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Trevor Ashford, she said clearly. You are under arrest for wire fraud, securities violations, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. The auditorium erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. The audience was on its feet. Elena jumped up and yelled over the chaos. That is my sister. That is my pregnant sister. You just got served, asshole. Security escorted her out, but she was grinning the entire way. Maddie stood at the center of the storm, one hand on her belly, watching the man who had tried to destroy her get handcuffed and led away. Trevor's eyes found hers one last time, and for the first time since she had known him, she saw genuine fear. Good. The weeks following Trevor's arrest passed in a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and physical exhaustion. Maddie gave depositions. She reviewed documents. She answered the same questions 100 different ways for 100 different lawyers. The SEC investigation expanded. More evidence emerged. Trevor's fraud went deeper than anyone had realized, involving falsified investor reports, manipulated audits, and systematic theft from the very people who had trusted him. Dominic Reeves's involvement came to light as well. His deletion of Maddie's files was documented. His firm faced investigation. The man who had positioned himself as her ally was exposed as just another predator. He sent Maddie a one-line email 3 weeks after Trevor's arrest. Well played. She did not respond. 6 weeks after the showdown, Maddie went into labor. Elena drove her to the hospital at 3 in the morning, breaking approximately 17 traffic laws in the process. "You are doing great," Elena kept saying. "Just breathe. We are almost there. I am going to kill you for driving so fast. You can kill me after the baby is born. Right now, breathe." The delivery was long and difficult. 14 hours of contractions, complications, moments where Maddie feared the worst. But at 7:23 in the evening, on a Wednesday in October, Clara Rose Cross came into the world. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. Dark hair like her mother, perfect in every way. Maddie held her daughter for the first time and felt something she had not experienced in years. Peace. Pure, overwhelming peace. The legal proceedings continued through the fall and into winter. Trevor's trial began in January. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness after witness testified to his fraud, his manipulation, his systematic destruction of anyone who threatened his image. Maddie testified for 2 days. She told her story calmly, clearly, without tears or dramatics. She answered every question with the precision of the analyst she had always been. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The sentencing came 6 weeks later. Maddie attended with Clara, in her arms, and Elena at her side. The judge reviewed Trevor's crimes methodically: wire fraud, securities violations, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, filing false statements. Then she delivered her verdict: 8 years in federal prison. The courtroom erupted. Maddie sat still, holding her daughter, watching Trevor's face as the reality of his future finally sank in. He looked at her one last time. She felt nothing. No anger, no triumph, no satisfaction, just relief. It was over. Sloan Mitchell started a nonprofit for women escaping financially abusive relationships. She and Maddie were not friends, but they nodded to each other at events. Victoria Caldwell was disbarred for ethical violations. Her firm collapsed. No one missed it. Marcus Webb, Trevor's fixer, faced his own legal troubles. When several of his methods were exposed during the trial, he was last seen fleeing to a country without an extradition treaty. Charles Whitmore, Trevor's mentor, gave a long interview about how he had been deceived. He donated a significant sum to organizations supporting abuse survivors. Maddie was not sure if it was genuine remorse or reputation management. She did not particularly care. 1 year after Trevor's sentencing, Maddie sat in the office of her own company. Cross Analytics occupied a modest suite in a Brooklyn building with exposed brick walls and large windows that let in plenty of natural light. The algorithm was officially credited to her. Licensing deals were generating steady income. Her team consisted of 12 employees who were talented, dedicated, and fairly compensated. Clara played on a soft mat in the corner, supervised by a very attentive Elena. You know, Elena said, watching her niece stack blocks with intense concentration. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Why? Because it has been going right for so long. That is not normal, Maddie laughed. Maybe we earned some normal. Her phone buzzed. A news alert. Trevor Ashford denied early release. Will serve full sentence. She read it, closed the tab, looked at her daughter. Clara, she said softly, can you say mama? Clara looked up and grinned, revealing two tiny teeth. Ma, she said. Close enough. Sometimes you cannot get back what was stolen. But you can demonstrate who you truly are. Skills cannot be faked. Knowledge cannot be erased from your mind. And in the end, that is what matters most. 3 years later, Maddie stood on a stage at a technology conference, preparing to deliver a keynote address on innovation and resilience in the face of adversity. The auditorium was packed. Clara, now a precocious toddler, with her mother's dark hair and curious eyes, was backstage with Elena, who had sworn that keeping a 3-year-old entertained for 45 minutes would not be that hard. Maddie adjusted the microphone and looked out at the audience. 3 years ago, she began, I stood on a different stage in this city, fighting for the right to claim my own work. Today, I want to talk about what happened after. The room was silent, attentive. I want to talk about rebuilding, about starting over when everything you have built has been torn down, about finding strength in moments when you have no strength left. She paused, letting the words settle. The algorithm that changed my life, the one that was stolen from me, that I had to publicly prove was mine, it is still working. It is still predicting markets with 93% accuracy. It has generated billions in revenue for the companies that license it. But that is not what I want to talk about today. She looked out at the audience and saw faces that reflected her own journey. Tired faces, hopeful faces, faces that had known defeat and were searching for reasons to keep fighting. I want to talk about the moment I almost gave up. It was a Tuesday night in September, 3 years ago. I was in a hospital bed, 8 months pregnant, facing a custody battle. I was certain I would lose. My evidence had been destroyed by someone I trusted. My lawyer had betrayed me. My ex-husband had spent millions to convince the world I was mentally unstable. I lay in that bed, and I genuinely believed it was over. The audience was completely still. My sister was there. She asked me what we were going to do, and I did not have an answer. But then something shifted. I started thinking about my daughter, about the world she would grow up in if I gave up, about what kind of example I would set if I let a man who had stolen everything from me also steal my ability to fight. And I realized something important. Maddie's voice strengthened. Rock bottom is not the end. It is a foundation. You cannot build anything lasting on sand. But stone holds everything. She looked at the audience. So if you are here today, and you are struggling, and you feel like you have nothing left, I want you to know something. That feeling is lying to you. You have yourself. You have your mind. You have every skill, every talent, every piece of knowledge you have ever acquired. Those things cannot be stolen. They cannot be destroyed. They cannot be taken from you, no matter how hard someone tries. The room was absolutely silent. The best version of your life does not come from defeating the people who hurt you. It comes from building something so beautiful that their shadow cannot reach it. Focus on what you are running toward, not what you are running from. She paused. 3 years ago, I was running from Trevor Ashford. Today, I am running toward my daughter's future, toward my company's growth, toward every opportunity I never thought I would have. And I want you to find what you are running toward too. The applause was overwhelming. Maddie stepped back from the podium, blinking against the lights, feeling something warm spread through her chest. She had done it, not just survived, thrived. Backstage, Elena was waiting with Clara, who immediately demanded to be picked up. Mama did good? Clara asked, wrapping her arms around Maddie's neck. Mama did her best. Elena was grinning. You know that thing you said about rock bottom being a foundation? Yeah? I am totally putting that on a pillow. Maddie laughed, holding her daughter close. Please do not. Too late. Already texted it to the screen printing place. That night, after the conference, Maddie sat in her office with Clara asleep in a portable crib, and Elena passed out on the couch. The city sparkled outside her window. 3 years of building, 3 years of fighting, 3 years of proving that she was exactly who she had always known herself to be. Her phone buzzed. A message from Detective Martinez, who had become a friend over the years. Saw your speech. Your mother would be proud. Maddie smiled and typed back. Thanks, Angela. That means a lot. She set the phone down and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Brooklyn stretching toward Manhattan. Somewhere in a federal prison, Trevor Ashford was marking days on a wall, waiting for a freedom that would come too late to matter. Somewhere, Victoria Caldwell was rebuilding her life in obscurity, her reputation permanently destroyed. Somewhere, Dominic Reeves was fighting his own legal battles, learning what it felt like to be on the other side of justice. And here, in this office she had built with her own hands, Maddie Cross stood at the beginning of everything she had ever wanted. Clara stirred in her crib, making small sounds of protest against sleep. Maddie crossed the room and lifted her daughter, settling into the chair by the window. You know what, Clara, she whispered. Some people spend their whole lives building prisons for others. The best revenge is not watching them finally get locked up. It is realizing you were never actually trapped in the first place. Clara blinked sleepily, then snuggled closer. I love you, baby girl. Love you, Clara mumbled back. Maddie smiled, holding her daughter close, watching the city lights flicker and glow. This was not how she had imagined her life would turn out. It was better. Here's the truth no one tells you. The best version of your life does not come from defeating the people who hurt you. It comes from building something so beautiful that their shadow cannot reach it. Focus on what you are running toward, not what you are running from. I spent years running from Trevor Ashford, from his lies, from his cruelty, from the version of myself that he tried to convince me was all I would ever be. Now I am running toward mornings with my daughter, toward challenges that make me grow, toward a future I created with my own hands. If you are out there, struggling, fighting, wondering if it is worth it to keep going, I want you to know, it is worth it. You are worth it. And the best is yet to come. Dominic Reeves sat alone in his diminished office, reviewing the latest reports from his legal team. The investigation into his deletion of Maddie's evidence had resulted in significant fines and a tarnished reputation. His firm was surviving, but barely. The invincibility he had worn like armor for decades was gone. A knock at the door. His assistant entered, carrying a small package. This just arrived, she said. No return address. Dominic frowned and opened the box. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. You deleted her files, but you forgot about the backup. Enjoy. Signed, a friend. Dominic plugged the drive into his computer. The files began to load. Thousands of them. Emails, documents, recordings, evidence of every manipulation, every scheme, every questionable decision he had made over the past decade. Someone had been watching him. Someone had been documenting everything. His face went pale. The phone rang. Mr. Reeves? His assistant's voice was uncertain. There are federal agents in the lobby. They are asking to speak with you. Dominic stared at the files spreading across his screen. Then he laughed, a hollow, defeated sound. Well played indeed, he murmured. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked toward the door. The past always catches up eventually. It just had. If you love stories about justice, karma, and women who refuse to be silenced, you are in the right place. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss another story like this. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever had someone try to take credit for your work? Now, let us begin. Closing. Disclaimer. Thank you for staying until the very end. This story was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring you meaningful entertainment with real-life lessons. Every character, every twist, every moment was crafted to remind you that strength is not about never falling. It is about rising every single time. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And remember, your story is not over yet. The best chapter is still being written.